Welcome to the TROWE podcast, your ultimate destination for mastering the world of real estate and mortgage with an unwavering and huge emphasis on maintaining the right mindset. You know, in this ever-evolving landscape of real estate and mortgage, success absolutely requires more than just industry knowledge. It absolutely demands resilient and positive mindset. I'm anxious to share with you my experiences, storytelling, special guests. Let's get started. Focused on thinking, retaining, obtaining, and winning every single day. That's what TROWE stands for. Hold on tight. Here we go. All right, well, here we go. Episode 1, and there are no guests in the studio today that I've dubbed the Sales Success Studio, which I've been doing now for quite some time. Hello, everybody. I am Tim Rowen, and actually a national sales manager for Stanford Mortgage, and this is it. This is episode 1. A lot of folks have been saying, TROWE, you need to do a podcast. So I thought we'd start off by talking a little bit about how in the world we got to TROWE. Well, hold on tight. We're going to tell some stories here and a little bit about myself to help paint a better picture of how we got to where we are today. So I will just start by saying, you know, I'm one of 2 brothers. My brother and I, he's 13 months younger than me. Both my mom and dad, when we were both very, very young, 1 and 2 years old, separated, not uncommon, of course. And we were very fortunate as children to have our 2 parents, even though separated, still to this day get along very well. So I got to tell you that, you know, as I think back on it, that really helped a ton, really form who I've become over the years. And, you know, interestingly enough, both my parents, very hardworking, and we were living with my mom at the time. And at about the age of 7 and 8 years old, my mom had gotten remarried, and so had my dad. But my mom had gotten remarried, and we were going to be moving to New York, and I'll never, ever forget it because it's just had a profound impact on my life. And my stepfather at the time loaded my brother and I into the back of a U-Haul truck, positioned a couch just properly, I suppose, put us in the back of a U-Haul truck and took the roll-up door and rolled it down about 3/4 the way and put chicken wire across the back of the truck, and off to New York we went from Santa Clara, San Jose, California. So about 3,000 miles, 3.5 days or so in the back of a U-Haul truck. And of course, it was actually a ton of fun as a kid. Can you even imagine doing such a thing today? By the way, it all worked out great. Here I am, no harm, no foul. But things didn't work out once we got to New York. And my mom, being an extremely brave and resilient woman, truthfully, she loaded my brother and I and our new baby sister, actually, in a Fiat and drove us back across the country, back to the Bay Area in California, at which time we were given the opportunity to go live with my dad because my mom acknowledged, and I love her for this, acknowledged that at that age, that 7, 8, 8, 9, right in there, it was going to be imperative that we had an everyday impact of a father in our lives. And even though we saw him, it was the every other weekend visitation, as I'm sure a lot of us are aware of. So we did. We moved in with our father, and I got to tell you, it was fantastic. And I credit him to this day, honestly, for creating me and helping me become the man that I am as I sit here and speak into this microphone. So what I learned very, very early on is, even though I'd been in the back of a U-Haul truck to New York and then back driving across back to California, all of a sudden my father went from having 1 child with his second marriage, a new baby girl, my second sister. He all of a sudden now had his 2 boys moving in with him, and something interesting changed, and I think it stuck with me to this day, and that is, he absolutely had a need for a home. He was living in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath duplex there in the Bay Area, and he needed to have a home because the size of his family is, of course, expanding. Now, what sticks to me to this day is, and I've talked to him about this, it didn't matter what interest rates were at that time. What mattered is his need to have a home for his family, and he was prepared to do whatever was necessary, all within the law, of course, to obtain that home. And that's what he did. And why is this so important? Because it ingrained in me from a very young age that folks don't make a decision to buy a home or sell a home or refinance a home. I've just, to my core, don't believe that they make that decision solely based on what an interest rate is. Now, I've made that statement, and I'm sure a lot of you listening heard me say that interest rates don't matter. I want to clarify this. That's not what I said. Interest rates do matter. They are important. They affect affordability and so on and so forth. But what really matters is our clients' why, their need, and how do we best solve for that. And I really think from a very young age, that's what really set my mind off in that direction. I know that seems crazy. I certainly wasn't in the mortgage business when I was 9 years old. But as I grew up and went through the years, what I know is my father, a truck driver. I often joke around with a lot of my friends and family that I was raised in the cab of a truck, because there were a lot of years he again became a single man and a single father of 2 boys. And he had no option but to, on numerous occasions, have us in the cab of his truck with him. And it really started to shape and mold who I became. And I grew up in an environment where it wasn't about money, probably because we just didn't have it, right? So it really set that belief in me that there's a whole lot more than just interest rate, than just money in the bank, having fancy cars, because, gosh, we certainly didn't growing up. Now, I value those things, and they're all wonderful. But truthfully, growing up with my dad and my mom, actually very both strong people of faith, and there's just things a whole lot more important than just money, right? So getting a little sidetracked there, but I became very involved, thankful to my dad. I became very involved in Cub Scouting and eventually Boy Scouting, where I became an Eagle Scout in my later teenage years, and actually worked at summer camp every summer. And while I was working at summer camp, it was my job to teach the younger scouts different merit badges. Maybe it was first aid. My favorite ones were swimming, rowing, motorboating, sailing. Loved that job, by the way. I would go back to being at camp staff in a heartbeat if I could actually support my family doing it. But what's interesting is again, as we talk about how did I end up where I am today, it's really as a result of those experiences. And when I was put into a position where I had to teach others a certain skill in order to pass a merit badge or a skill for a camporee, whether it's knot tying or fire building, that started to build leadership qualities that I still use to this day. By the way, I still know all my knots. So I had a ton of fun with that. So then as I left high school, interestingly enough, no surprise here, probably I actually drove truck for a short time. I think it's the very first thing I learned how to drive was, in fact, a semi-truck, long before I actually had a regular issued driver's license. And so, of course, naturally, I just seemed to end up driving truck for a short bit. By the way, my dad didn't want me to drive truck. He certainly wanted better for me. And interestingly enough, when you look at the job market today, those are some of the best jobs out there, at least in regards to pay scale. So the truck industry has changed quite a bit. Now, that didn't last long for me. In fact, it was my dad that constantly said throughout the years, you need to be in sales. You need to be in front of people. You need to use your skills of talking with people. And quite honestly, I just, like most teenage kids, I mean, what could my dad possibly know? I'm 17 years old. I know way more than he did. Wasn't it interesting that here I am now here today? As it turns out, Dad, you were right. We talk about it and joke about it to this day. So anyway, I ended up in the automotive industry where I started off as a mechanic. I actually went through my apprenticeship with Ford Lincoln Mercury and started working and turning wrenches and draining oil and doing brake jobs and water pumps and you name it. I've done it when it came to working on cars. And over time, the management in the dealership said, you know, Tim, you really need to be a service advisor. Now, I didn't know this at the time, but being a service advisor turns out to be one of the best training grounds for sales possibly ever. if any of you are out there younger thinking of a great job experience that you can get into with no experience, truthfully, interview and go through the process, it is a great training ground for sales. And here's why. What I learned at a very young career in the car business, if you will, as a service advisor, I learned that, I was the guy that stood in a booth and people would drive in to drop their cars off in the morning. And if you sat in your booth and waited for the client to get out of their car and come to you, sure, they would, and you'd write up a few repair orders in a day. Or maybe it made more sense to hustle out of that booth and go greet that client and their car first thing in the morning. By the way, you write a whole lot more service repair orders doing that, and I'm here to tell you that rule still is true today. As a loan originator or a realtor or anybody in sales, I would challenge that if we just sit back and wait for our phone to ring, we're going to do a whole lot less deals than if we're proactively greeting people where they're at or calling them up. So, like I said, interestingly enough, not knowing it at the time, that actually established a great training ground for me, which eventually led to the career that I've been in now for 22, 23 years. So how did I get here? How did I get in the mortgage business? I've been an originator, branch manager, general manager, sales manager. I've been a loyalty and retention manager at a national level for the last 3 years. We'll get to that in just a bit. But what's interesting is I also had tremendous back problems through dirt bike riding, football, degenerative disc issues, and that ended up resulting in my third back surgery. And it was after that third back surgery, which, by the way, when you're in your early 30s and having just had your second and third child on the way, and you find out that, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to find something different to do for a living. My doctors, the neurosurgeon, would not release me to stand on my feet for 10 and 12 hours a day and get in and out of Toyota Corollas as I was working with folks. So what was I going to do? I did not have, at the time, any college education. I had street-level education is what I had, school of hard knocks, if you will, and real-time experience. Well, what that did is it led me back to school. And I went back to school in mortgage banking, real estate principles, those basic courses. And one thing led to another, and my mortgage banking instructor actually hired me at the end of the semester. And I started out with him in the broker world like much of us, or many of us, I should say, back in the early 2000s. And that has led me to where I am today. And interestingly enough, small shop, 1 or 2 people in it, broker shop. Back in the day when we were getting ready to go meet with a client, we would grab out of a cubbyhole a stack of blank disclosures, maybe a stack of blank conventional disclosures or FHA disclosures, and off to the client we would go. And I can remember sitting at the kitchen table with clients and completing disclosures and good faith estimates. How many of us remember those good faith estimates? Holy smokes, my chair just fell down. There we go. Yeah, so good faith estimates by pencil. So when you made a mistake on it, you just simply erased it and then you fixed it right back up. Anyway, one thing led to another, and some years into this, I had a great real estate agent referral partner, Mela, is her name, and she was at a much larger real estate company, and she referred me to the owner, the CEO of C21 Select Group in Northern California, because he owns a mortgage company, and they were looking for new leadership, and she thought I would be a great fit, and that led me there. So I'd actually been at Stanford Mortgage. By the way, if you're seeing video, you'll see Stanford Mortgage still on my shirt. I am back at Stanford Mortgage, but I was initially at Stanford Mortgage for just over 10 years. And we were partnered with Pinnacle Capital Mortgage, which eventually was sold off and became Finance of America. Some of you listening may have heard of Finance of America. And I quickly made great relationships with a lot of the executive leadership, regional and national leadership at Finance of America. And as a result, one of my truthfully great friends and mentors to this day was really my boss at the time, Craig Davis, asked me to take a national role with Finance of America. And boy, was I nervous and scared about that. I dove in. I did the best I could. Actually, it was great because what I started to learn was I loved having an audience. I loved being in front of people. I think everything that has formed over the years, from the time I was 8 and 9 years old to the time I sit here and speak with you all today, I think I literally am just focused on a service related, like a humbly serving. That's just who Tim Rowen is, or should I say TROWE. That's what I am all about. And taking on that national role was a huge step, but I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And during that time, I had some opportunities to put myself in front of small audiences, if you will. But I really thrive to put myself in front of larger audiences. It's just my comfort zone. It's what I've learned about myself. And so some of you may know that in October of 22, I used the phrase, the wheels came off the bus at Finance of America, and they made a business decision to stop working in the forward mortgage aspect of our business. And so 3 years, a little over 3 years doing that, and the party was over. And so, like a lot of us, we had to scramble and find a new home. I tried something still in the industry for a brief time, but it wasn't my happy place because I found myself in a position of really by myself originating loans, which, by the way, I do love originating loans, but it's not what I'm passionate about. Like, I want to help others accelerate and originate loans, or realtors expand their real estate business. That's really what I'm passionate about, is, I guess you would say, the coaching aspect of it, or the motivational aspect of it, is what really gets me going in a day. So anyway, the CEO of Century 21 Select Group, he called and he said, "We'd love to have you back." And so here I am. I'm back at Stanford Mortgage, and we are now actually have entered back into the broker world. We are away from the retail banking model. A lot of struggles going on in all of our industry right now, but we have made the decision to go back to the broker world, and so far, so good. We're learning a lot. I'll tell you that much. We are learning a lot. But one of the reasons that I wanted to come back to Select Group is because they do give me and the folks I work with a phenomenal audience in which to promote, coach, help build their business, because their real estate company has now expanded considerably. Quite honestly, I think there are upwards of 15 to 1,700 real estate agents now on the West Coast, multiple states, and as well with the broker model that we've jumped into, we can actually do loans in all 50 states. By the way, for any of you in California, you know, that's significant because a lot of folks are leaving California. So I mean, we won't get into the reasons why. There's lots of them, of course, but nonetheless, we are now able to service our clients end to end, whether they're here in California or anywhere else in the country. So that helps a ton. So why TROWE? Well, you know a little bit about me now, and I hope you get the feel that I'm really committed from a service level perspective. I'm also committed to coaching and teaching. It's what I'm passionate about. I love doing that. And, you know, all the time I was working with Craig Davis over there at Finance of America, you know, he always said or used the term street level leadership. And that really resonated with me because in all industries, you have a lot of leadership, or maybe I should say a lot of management, that is very high level. They may ask you to do things that they've never done themselves. They may ask you to use tools that they've never used. They may ask you to try business practices that they've never tried themselves. Whereas street level leadership, that's where I really thrived. And why? And I think it was well received. If any of you listen to this and we've worked together over the years, certainly please throw a comment in or share your opinion on this. I'd love to see or hear it. But I think the street level thing works so well for me because when I'm working with a group of realtors and loan originators, I am one of them. So I love that. I'm not, you know, some guy flying around the country, even though I was flying around the country, but just dropping in saying, do this and then leaving. No, I'm doing this from a street level perspective, and I'm in the trenches right along with all of them. And so that really is my happy place. So, again, how do we get to TROWE? I made TROWE an acronym. Got to make sure I can get that word out. And it stands for Think, Retain, Obtain, Win Every Day. Now, this actually kind of comes to play from somewhat of a slang term or a nickname, if you will. In all my years working with the real estate company and stuff, I'm really, really big on video when it comes to a communication strategy, both with clients and referral partners, especially as big as it's become on social media. So I've been using video in our industry for lots of years. And when I would close a transaction, I would oftentimes, especially with my referral partners that I had very close relationships with, I would oftentimes send them videos like almost making up new rap songs to famous early 90s rap songs, but I would change the lyrics to be specific to our transaction. And as a result, one in particular, and then more and more and more to this day, some of these real estate managers and real estate agents, they started referring to me as TROWE. Hey, TROWE, what's going on today? TROWE this. It's almost like being a football player, right? Everyone knows you by your last name. No one ever knows your first name. Well, that's very much what happened to me. And so to this day, I still receive emails from these folks company-wide and even people outside of the company that all refer to me as TROWE. And that is why I decided to turn it into an acronym about me and what I'm all about, which is, in fact, the importance of thinking, retaining, obtaining, winning every single day. That has to be what we focus on. And I want to be able to share that. And off in the very near future, in fact, hopefully the very next episode, we'll have some a guest, if not a couple of them in the studio. And by the way, I do have a studio here at my home. It's I'm very passionate about motorcycle riding. I have a Harley Davidson and love taking rides on my Harley, hanging with my buddy, and my wife goes out. By the way, this is no side note here, but, you know, growing up, as I explained that story to you, and my parents were split, even though they didn't know it at the time, what they did teach me, and I know this sounds crazy, but what I learned from my parents is when I do make the decision to get married, it will be forever. And I am happy to report that my wife and I, high school sweethearts, started dating when we were juniors in high school, and we were married when we were 20 years old, and we are still married today, which will be 36 years this upcoming November in 2023. How awesome is that? And I love sharing that because it's just, you don't hear it a lot. And so I'm pretty ecstatic to still have the same partner, if you will, for all these years. She's my best friend, and I'm just happy to still be married to her. 36 years. Can you believe that? Anyway, here we are. Here we go. Future episodes, there will be some fantastic guests, both in the real estate and mortgage industry and outside of our industries as well. You know, I mentioned how impactful Mr. Craig Davis has been on my both personal and professional life. And Craig now owns Ascend Experience, and it's a coaching program, both individual and or team coaching. And we will definitely have Craig in the studio. And gosh, when we do, I will make a big deal of it because, gosh, honestly, to listen to Craig speak and kind of how he dives into the importance of mindset and controlling your state of mind and everything, it's so, so important. And it really, really is. So we definitely want to spend a lot of time on future podcasts talking about that and why it's so important. I'll also look to share with you some great books. Some of them have been around a while, but I'm anxious to share with you all books that have had a major impact on me, both personally and professionally. And I also want to take a minute to share with you all the tail end of my journey, which leads me up to this podcast. I say the tail end of my journey. Shoot, we might just be getting started, right? But professionally, I had met Renee Rodriguez several years ago through some good friends of mine, Don and Gino, who host an event called Momentum Builder. And when I first met Renee, it was very profound. I was very taken back by this gentleman. He's just incredible. If you haven't heard of him, definitely look him up, and I'll put some information out there. He's also a best-selling author with his book, which is also phenomenal. We'll talk about that in future episodes as well. But Renee hosts an event called Amplify, and it's basically a 2.5-day, very intense event. And there's limited to 10 people per event. So it's very exclusive, small group coaching, all focused on really the art of storytelling, changing the narrative, how to tie things down when you're addressing a group of folks. And I probably said that all in the wrong order. So Renee, if you happen to listen to this, don't hammer me too hard on it. But an interesting thing happened for me in October of 2022. Now, remember, I told you that's at the same time that the wheels came off the bus over at Finance of America. And talk about a very troubling time for me professionally. I happen to be in the middle of remodeling a home. The kitchen is completely gutted. I've already ordered the cabinets, so I'm committed, only to find myself getting ready to be out of work. And it's like, well, I can't hold on to that money. I'm committed. We're going to have to continue to at least finish that phase of the project, which we've done, by the way. So I had signed up months earlier to attend an Amplify event, and I'd already paid the money. However, because of different things going on, I kept postponing it. I kept reaching out to Renee and his team saying, hey, can I do the next session? And then the next one would come around, I'd say, hey, can I do the next session? And finally, coming up to the October session, which I had rescheduled for, it was going to be in Las Vegas, I again got cold feet and tried to cancel. But this time, they said no. We have you planned. We have you counted in the head count for our dinner tonight. You really need to be here. So we are going to say no. We're not going to allow you to reschedule. So I'm like, okay, we're going to Vegas. So off to Vegas I went. And of course, I didn't know what to really expect, even though I'd seen Renee speak a few times in large group settings, but never anything this intimate. And on the very first exercise, you do this thing where you have to get up in front of the small group and kind of go through this process that Renee works you through. And it's absolutely phenomenal. And what would happen is you would get up in front of the group and then you would start doing your thing. And Renee might jump up and stop you and correct you, right? All in a great way. Like, wait a minute, let's start over again. Think about doing this with your hands. Maybe step into this. Just really, really one-on-one coaching. So I was nervous, of course. I didn't know this group of folks. And so it was my turn to go up there. So up to the front of the room I went, and I started doing my thing. And something very interesting happened. Renee never jumped up to stop me, correct me, and have me start over again and try new techniques. And I was actually a little taken back by this. And in fact, it made me very self-conscious, like, oh my gosh, I've screwed up so bad that not even Renee can fix this. But nonetheless, I finished up it's probably only a couple minutes long. And Renee jumps up. And I have to share this with you because it's very personal. It's very profound impact it's had on me, both personally and professionally. But Renee jumped up and he says, before we dive into Tim and you Tim, and your talk that you just gave, can I ask everyone in the classroom by show of hands who thinks that Tim is extremely talented at this? And I was really set back on my heels. I was like, okay, by the way, everyone's hand went up. A few comments were made like, hey man, are you a professional? Like, have you been through this course before? No, I'm not a professional in that arena. And no, I had never been in that course before. Lord knows I even tried to cancel getting to that one. And this is where it becomes very, very special for me. Renee turns to me and he says, he said to me, are you a man of faith? And I said, well, yes, I am. I said, but maybe more importantly, the timing of you asking me this question where I was professionally, remember again, I was getting ready to lose my job at Finance of America. And I said, yes, I am. And I've been praying a ton about what direction am I going to go? Where do I best serve other people? And Renee looked me straight in the eye with his hand on my shoulder. I remember like it was yesterday. And he said, listen to me very carefully. He says, you've been given a gift and you must find a way to use this gift. Now, I got to tell you, I get a little choked up talking about it even to this day. I mean, it was such an incredible experience. And I still stay obviously very close to Renee. Anytime I can jump on any of his calls. I don't know if someday I'll be fortunate enough to have Renee jump onto my podcast. Wouldn't that be something? But nonetheless, I share that with you because it was literally in October of 2022 that Renee made that statement to me as a part of the process of being in his Amplify course that has literally changed the course since that time for me professionally. And what do I mean by that? Well, I knew right then and there that yes, I can do loans. I enjoy doing loans. But what I love doing is what I was doing there at that Amplify event. What I love doing is presentations in front of large groups. I'm passionate about these things. And so I'm anxious now. So I know I've gone on and an awful lot, but I'm anxious now with a huge request of a lot of folks saying, T-Rowe, you need to do a podcast. T-Rowe, do a podcast. T-Rowe, are you going to start your podcast? Well, here we go. Episode 1, and T-Rowe is starting his podcast. I'm going to wrap it all up today, but I'll look forward to sharing more stories with you and honestly diving into, again, thinking, retaining, and obtaining, all of which lead to the ultimate victory of winning every day. Have a great day, everyone. Till next time.